We're live.
Dr. Freeman, how are you?
I presume. I'm fine. I'm
Here in the
s-
wilds of the internet, right?
oh, yes.
How
How
was
are
your
you?
week?
My week was okay. My week was a teaching normal-ish week.
Ah, it turned cold here. It's been beautiful, and I've spent every possible moment I could on the water, and then all of a sudden it plummeted 30 degrees and the wind kicked up. And we're supposed to have a nor'easter, I think, starting tomorrow.
That's what I heard too, even here. So,
Yeah. So there goes my kayaking. But
oh,
don't go. Well, not really. I'll get out today. I've got a wetsuit. Anybody's worried I have a wetsuit and I wear a life jacket and all that, and I go with somebody, so we're good. Anyway, so nothing happened this week, so maybe it's
no,
not worth.
it's the quiet, normal, quiet week out there in the world where nothing happens, and you think, huh, wow, what's in the news? No,
A-
it's go ahead.
Actually, we do want to talk about something, but now that you say that, Joanne, there was an image that went across the internet. I think it was late last night or very early this morning of Scott McFarlane, the person who reports on legal cases, and he's just got his head in his hands. And the caption was something like, "This is the 24-hour news cycle." And I have to say, it really hit home for me because every freaking time you think, okay, phew, that's it. We're done for a while. I can, make dinner and go to bed. Something else drops. And you realize that there's a factory in that administration that is doing this deliberately to exhaust us. And
Right,
that, of course,
and
that
there's
just
no
makes
way
me
out.
mad. So
No,
I'm
it's
like,
totally
screw
true.
you. I'm going to manage it.
No, it's totally true. And no matter what you do, right? If you stay tuned in, then you're just going to keel over from exhaustion. If you walk away and come back, then you got to catch up with the string of things that happened during the 15 minutes when you walked away to make coffee. So yeah, it's yes, and it's infuriating and exhausting anyway. But the fact that there's some deliberateness to it is even more infuriating. Yes.
And it does make me feel like, and maybe this is an unintentional transition to what we're going to talk about, but it does make me feel like at some level, you just got to stop reacting to them and write our own story. Because this is literally how people retain control over others, is keeping them so exhausted and so off balance that
Yes.
all they can do is defend themselves. Whereas if you I always think of it as taking a step forward and saying, okay, you go create your havoc over there. I'm going to make a better world. It just, not only does it move the ball forward, it helps you retain control of your mind.
I say it almost every week on my Friday morning webcast thing, is that in this climate, you need to stop and breathe when you're having a strong response to something. And to me, what that means is someone really trying to provoke me and get me to have a response that will be convenient for them right now? And that is so true so often, that taking that moment to stop and breathe and say, okay, wait a minute, what am I responding to? Is the goal here to get me? Am I being manipulated in some way with some version, not necessarily of propaganda, but like strategically dropped bombs of news so that I will have a certain reaction or not have a certain reaction? And the answer often is yes, which is part of why you and I are so, and I'm sure many, many other people, infuriated by it.
Well, and I do think it is propaganda. I mean, if you look at what the radical right is building with this idea of there being um, riots in Portland, and I do want to talk about the frog, riots in Portland, and this idea that there is a concerted group of radical, what do they call them? Radical left. I mean, we'll go through all the list of terms.
Yeah.
That's just not true. I mean, it's just absolutely fake. And I saw somewhere on one of the legacy media channels today talking about how, well, both sides are advancing a different view. It's like, no, one side is actually trying to say this is what's happening. There is not a riot. There are not riots in Portland, Oregon, and in
They're
Chicago,
either
Illinois.
rioting or not.
That's right.
You know, it's
Right.
like there's no both sides. So yes, no, it's there's still, actually, the fact that some people, some legacy media is still both sidesing this moment, it is kind of mind blowing, and that's a perfect example of that. It's like, no, they aren't writing, and there aren't the boards on the windows, and I don't know what the craziness. Which maybe this should segue us into what we wanted to talk about this morning. What we wanted to talk about this morning has to do with a particularly focused stream of nonsensical accusations intended to have us respond in one way or another, fear, concern, whatever, that's come out because it's very clear that the administration and its folk are terrified at October 18th, No King's Day coming up. And to me, even though I realize there's nothing comical about this, it seemed to me, or it felt to me, maybe I walked away for 10 minutes and came back, but suddenly there was like this string of claims being thrown out, that like, well, you know, it's radical leftists. Oh no, it's Marxists. Oh no, it's actually Hamas. Oh no, Soros is paying them. And it was like within a 15-minute period, it was like throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? It was like, it's this, no, it's this, oh, whatever it is, it's fake and it's bad. Already over and over and over and over again, which, and I guess this is what we'll talk about, pisses me off, because they're just trying to get us scared, to frighten us and get us to not go, because they are so scared at what's going to be happening that day. Simply the fact that there will be so many Americans peacefully marching with signs that they will not be able to say, oh, it's just a handful of Marxists, or whatever the new claim will be.
Yeah, it's an attempt to get people not to turn out. And it's really interesting because you can see since the shutdown, which has gone on now, I mean, at this point, House Speaker Mike Johnson has said that he's not going to call the House back in session for 4 freaking weeks so far. They've been throwing everything at the wall to try and blame the Democrats for the shutdown, even saying Democrats voted against opening the government again, which is not what happened. They voted not to permit the Republicans to push through a continuing resolution until they addressed those premium tax credits that were not extended in the Republicans' July bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is going to send premiums skyrocketing. And 78% of Americans want those tax credits extended. So first, you know, they're trying to throw this at the wall. Then they're trying to say, well, we're not going to pay people who are furloughed. Oh, we're going to fire people. I mean, they're trying to do everything. And then really, like you say, concertedly yesterday, House Speaker Mike Johnson, Majority Whip Tom Emmer, one from Louisiana, one from Minnesota, both came out and said, oh, this is an anti-American rally full of Marxists, pro-Hamas. I forget some of the other terms. And it's a really interesting thing, because increasingly it looks like sheer desperation when you look at the fact you got 2 Republican governors now saying, hey, we don't think Trump should be sending the National Guard into other states. And you've got 78% of Americans saying, yeah, we want to have those tax credits extended, and blaming the Republicans for the shutdown. And it's just weird, because you sort of feel, you know, our big thing, I think, is we the people versus this small cabal, and they continue to try and turn it into friends and enemies, and everybody else is the enemy. And you know, they're down to just, you know, a bunker full of people.
No, absolutely. And what struck me yesterday, you know, it's, you and I say very often that the aggression right now has to do with the fact that they're weak and they know it. And I realize that that's a counterintuitive thing to say. But what came out in the last day or so was actual desperation. You know, throwing all of those accusations about October 18th felt to me on like a visceral level, like just fear and desperation. Because in the end, if millions of us show up all over the place with signs and just peacefully march, I'm sorry, but no one is wealthy enough to pay, you know, all these people to somehow to claim that we're fake. To all of the claims that they're making will make no sense when a lot of people peacefully turn out. So it in a new way to me, although intellectually I've been saying and thinking they're increasingly feeling desperate. To me, it was like in the air yesterday when they began. It was like they said, oh, it's a week to October 18th. Let's go. Let's start throwing out lies and craziness. And of course, the goal is silence and compliance, right? Where people
Well, and there's also, you know, I spend a lot of time gaming out where I think the future of politics is going. I never write about it because it's just a guess on my part. But the Republicans have a real problem. I mean, they have these Epstein files. There was actually a Scott McFarlane piece the other day saying that they have taken that his news organization took a look at the report on Jeffrey Epstein's death and found that in fact it was the crime scene had been really dramatically altered. Yeah, and that got very little traction, I think, in part because we're all sort of overwhelmed by information about the Epstein files. But that's not going away. This idea of not swearing in a Democratic representative from Arizona, Adelita Grijalva, because she will be the 218th vote on that discharge petition that will force a vote. Eric Swalwell saying, you know, a lot of Republicans are ready to jump ship at this point because of the Epstein files. They got that out there. They also have the fact that there are furloughed people, including military members, who are not being paid during the shutdown. And again, they're trying to blame that on the Democrats. They're even putting that thing up at the airports, at the TSA lines, saying this is a Democrat's fault. But, you know, at some point, something's got to give. And, you know, one of the things that always jumps out to me is, and you and I talk about this a lot, is that many of our guardrails have not held because our elected representatives have not pushed the impeachments that they should have, the hearings that they should have, the requirements for saying, yeah, Trump can declare an emergency about this, for example. But the ultimate guardrail is the people. Right. And, you know, there are very few people who are now looking at the Trump administration saying, yeehaw, this is great. Right. Now, there are certainly some, but a lot of people who were reluctant voters or even voting for the economy to get better or many of the other things that now they're looking at this going like,
right.
I got nothing here.
And the thing is, you know, I don't know if it's been framed this way, but it's how I've been thinking about the simple fact that not only are they, you know, again, throwing spaghetti at the wall to try and find the thing that somehow is going to make people think this has something to do with the Democrats, but by actually just closing down the House, by not swearing in an elected representative, they're actually, you know, denying people their representation in Congress. These people voted for this woman and gave her the authority to represent them, you know, and back in the period that we've written about, they would be, you know, people would be petitioning and they would be up in arms because they were being literally denied representation in Congress. Oh, we're sorry. We know you elected her, but we're sorry. We're not going to let her come in right now because we don't like the way she might vote. This is so, and nothing that I'm saying here is new, but I suppose this is part of the many things that make me red hot angry. This is so inherently obviously unrepresentative, undemocratic, just like we don't like what you're going to do, so now we're not going to do anything.
But don't you think, Joanne, that this is a reflection of the 40-year process of convincing a number of Republican voters that Democrats have no right to govern? That if people actually elect Democrats, it's a mistake. These voters were illegal voters, or they were bought, or they were cheating, or they were, you know, or these Democrats simply shouldn't be allowed to vote. And I think back to the North Carolina in 1898 when we had the riot is, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on which town it is. I think it's Greensboro. I could be wrong on that one, where they said, listen, we know that those people were elected legally, but we're not going to be governed by them. And I looked this week at Trump sort of talking about, you know, we have to get rid of this gnat on our shoulder. It's the Democrats. Right. And that idea that an entire group of people is an illegitimate body for governance, even when people are electing them in.
Right. Well, right. And that's the goal, right? So the ultimate goal here is to make people think that the only people fit to govern are a certain kind of Republicans generally, but a certain kind of Republican, and that anyone who opposes them is illegitimate, is anti-American. One of the many things that had me fist clenched was just the simple idea that people marching in a No King's Day event, right, who are saying, no, you know, we don't want a king, we like our Constitution and checks and balances, are somehow anti-American. So the goal here is to make it seem as though there's only one group that should be given the power to govern, and it is that same small group that we're talking about a few minutes ago as being desperate, that's who they feel should have all the power. And their goal, in any way they can possibly do it, is to make anyone who opposes that little group seem illegitimate, seem like they are anti-American, just filling the anti-whatever, that we aren't, credible. It's how do I want to put this? It's stamping on the very idea that there can be political opposition.
Right. Just quickly, somebody corrected me. Thank you very much. It's Wilmington, North Carolina, which I should know. It's just too early for me this morning because I was up till 4 last night. That and the recognition that at this point, this is people who are simply against the takeover of our government by a small cabal of people. So we're not talking about Democrats. We're also talking about independents and a lot of Republicans. And this is how you get, President Donald Trump talking about somebody like James Comey, a Republican, as being a radical left Democrat. I mean,
because that's in their mind. If they can have all opposition, all Democrats, all bad, and if they can create what they want people to believe is a bundle of bad, right? They're flipping, as ever, they're flipping the story. So we're sitting here saying there's a bundle of bad that are trying to take all the power. And essentially what we're describing here is them flipping and saying, oh no, there's a bundle of bad and it's the Democrats, it's the opposition, and we need to crush them. We need to eliminate them. As ever, it's projection, and it's, that we said a little while back, it's creating a convenient narrative that increasingly is so obviously false. And as I said before, so it's breathing fear and desperation.
So one of the things that interests me about this moment is how much it looks like the 1850s when we got the rise of the Republican Party out of the remnants of the Whigs.
I just the simple fact that this reminds me of the 1850s means you're supposed to be my friend.
Well, you know what? Yes, but I will say, in terms of the craziness, I find my happy place is history. So it's funny that one of the things I do resent about this period is that I get to do so little history, and yet when I'm really stressed out, I do a deep dive into history, which I think is interesting. That
teaching is what gets me into a happier place. Is the idea that I'm giving something to other people, but it's still history just the same. You're right.
To me, it's just like it's like smooth sailing when I'm looking up stuff, and reading stuff. But one of the things that gives us the rise of the Republican Party on the remnants of the Whig Party is that there is this enormously pent up anger on the part of Americans for a government that responds to their actual needs. And I looked, I watch Mike Johnson especially, but also Senator John Thune of South Dakota in the Senate, and how silent the Republican senators are being. Silent. Do you even know we have them? I watch that and I think literally they are standing against policies that, in the case of the extension of the tax credits for the insurance markets, that 78% of Americans want. More than 80% of Americans want common sense gun safety legislation. People want better health care. They want better housing opportunities. They want, very basic things, but not like 50.1%. I mean, we're talking huge majorities. So when this floodgate opens and we get rid of the Russell Vogt at the Office of Management and Budget, who's trying to force this extraordinarily unpopular Project 2025 down our throats. And you get rid of Stephen Miller as White House Deputy Chief of Staff, who's pushing through all these attacks on his opponents and really doing these horrific things to detainees. You can see how you got the revolution that we got, in the post-Civil War years, where you got a government that backed education and, got rid of human enslavement except as punishment for crimes, and insisted people would be treated equally before the law. And that stuff looks very similar to me.
No, it does. And particularly in this moment, what brings me back to the 1850s is just part of the reason for the rise of the Republican Party is that you said pent up, and I thought this is where you were going. The pent up outrage at wanting people to push back. People knew that they were being denied things, deprived things, that government was not functioning the way it should function, no matter what your ideology was. And they wanted people to push back. And the Republicans promoted themselves as the people who were going to push back. That was what they campaigned on. And the way that they put it was, we're going to fight the slave power, because Southerners were largely in control of the government at that point. But still, that's what I keep going back to, is that there was a moment when there was so much pent up anger and a real realization of where things were. And that's part of why, I mean, the Republicans, you know all of this, I realize you've written about it, but the fact that that party rose so quickly to power and to having a president, that was a product of the pent up convictions and emotion of people who were angry about what they saw and just wanted people to stand up. And so, yeah, when we're looking, out in the world and we're seeing, as you just put it, as far as Republican members of Congress go, silence, just like we have been watching for quite some time, the checks and balances and walls just being sort of happily toppled and nobody saying anything one way or another about it. And the other thing I was going to add a little while ago is another prop of what's going on, which has been thrown out the window, is norms, right? That way early on, there were just basic norms that we didn't think about because they were norms and we assumed that was the way government was supposed to work, that were thrown out the window. And even those aren't really around anymore to prop things up. So at any rate, when I think of the 1850s, what I'm beaming into is just the outrage of people who understood what they were being denied and who wanted people to stand up and say, yeah, we see you, we know what you want. We want government to function. We want it to represent everyone. It can't just represent the South and slavery. Let's go.
I think that's right. I also wonder if part of what happened in the 1850s is also happening now, in the sense that what you are describing is a new generation of people who have a different set of experiences than the old Whigs and the old Democrats, who were, basically just getting along. And their reality was so different because they had moved to cities, because they had moved out to the West. I'm thinking of somebody like Owen Lovejoy, who moved from Maine to Illinois, and who had his brother was killed. He was a journalist who was killed by pro-slavery agitators. And Owen Lovejoy moves out to Illinois and becomes quite a powerful lawmaker out there, in a way that, the old guard just didn't get him. Benjamin Wade, another guy from Ohio, who had been a drover on the Erie Canal, which was kind of like not a high class position. And these guys rose to power, and their version of what the country should be was really dramatically different than the former elites that had run things. And I feel like we're seeing the same thing now.
I think you're absolutely right. And someone like Wade, the language that he used, the behavior that he was using while in Congress, he literally at one point says, we're a new kind of congressman. We're a new kind. And he doesn't mean, I think what he means explicitly is what you're saying. He's not part of the old guard. There are people who have come who are generationally different, socially different. In one way or another, they see themselves as kind of a new, I don't even want to say new guard, because they're not necessarily a guard, but a new way of pushing and a new way of representing and a new way of standing up. And I do think that, and we've talked about this in one way or another before, with people like Jasmine Crockett and people who are younger and standing up and speaking back. So I do think there's some generational change, and there should probably be more generational change. But I totally agree with you that there's a more massive change happening. And so to me, when I am able to think down the road about how things will emerge when we get past this, whenever that is, I think about things like what you suggested a moment ago. In some ways, it will look different because we've learned how to politic differently. And we've experienced different kinds of suppression and different kinds of threats on a different scale than perhaps many of us at least have felt before. We will understand our political system differently, and we will understand its frailties differently. And we will see the ways in which it needs to be propped up differently in a way that, certainly I can say growing up in the 70s, you just as a kid assume everything's fine and peachy and democracy is good and it'll be here forever and yay USA, and the sort of partly being a kid and partly the 70s way of thinking about things. We're on a different planet, and in the end that might not be a bad thing. This should be in the end an educational process for us.
Well, in both cases, though, you're seeing a rising group of people who are being denied the opportunity to rise to prosperity, which was certainly the fear of the slave power in the 1850s, because if they took over the West and moved human enslavement there and then made it national, they would create this oligarchy that monopolized all the resources. And when I think about young people, the Ute now, and how freaking expensive housing and education and childcare. I mean, it's, I don't think that lots of people in our age group, young though we are,
You didn't make an age joke about me.
Well, you know what? You know why?
Oh, why? I'm going to walk right in. Why?
No, this one's on me. I am now your age. My birthday was this week.
Oh, that's true. Oh, dang. If I remembered that we were.
I have to shut up for a while now.
I totally would have taken advantage of that if I thought about the actual simple fact that we are now the same age.
So you're good for a while now.
Woo-hoo.
But if you think about the function of a government domestically, that's a real issue. And I think that pressure point, even though everything is so different, like you say, the idea that the government is not responding to the needs of most people is really important. And it is really visible now when you have President Trump and his cronies doing things like, building all these new monuments and stuff in Washington, D.C. at the same time that they're turning around and giving $20 billion to Argentina to prop up, their political ally and to put money into a hedge fund guy's pockets, and then turning around and driving prices through the roof for ordinary people. It's really, if you think about writing this historically, this crisis of this moment, although it's been 40 years in the building, is the kind of flashpoint where you see a group of people waking up and saying, hey, this is not what we thought we signed on to.
And the irony of that to me is, the sort of ploy of, we're going to keep eroding government. We're going to keep laying people off. We're going to keep chipping away at institutions that do basic things like, protect our health. They think they're being clever and crafty, like, ooh, we're doing more of what we want to do. And these are things that Democrats like. It's like, well, no, actually, they're basic things that people like and need rather than Democrat things. The more they do that and the more inconvenience and just basic normal life things that, TSA agents at the airport, the more this boils down to a level where people can see all the ways in which this sort of clever anti-democrat eroding of government is affecting them, that's not going to help them. That's going to hurt them. People will see when people begin even more feeling in their daily lives, as we already are, but if he continues on in this way, it'll get worse. What he thinks is clever Republican anti-democratic strategy is just going to be a really visible example of the GOP pulling more things away from the public, denying the public, ignoring the public, and not thinking about what the public needs.
Well, in part because they are living in that propaganda world. If you watch Fox and if you watch right-wing influencers, the Portland's on fire and Chicago's on fire and it's all the Democrats' fault. And, it's actually really weird because, I maintain people don't like to be lied to, but it's a pretty closed circle. So we'll see.
But I also do want for a moment, just to make a point now that you've mentioned Portland, Um, and I don't just want to mention the frog, but I do want to mention the frog. But in talking a little bit about what's happening out there and the fact that it's not on fire and buildings aren't boarded up and, whatever wacky things are being said about Portland, in some of my talking about this over the course of the week, some people responded by saying, well, big deal. Like people are like in Portland are using humor to push back against ICE. And they said it doesn't matter. And I think that's really wrong because authoritarianism, dictators rely on fear for power. They rely on people being too scared to stand up to them. And humor, standing up to them in an inflatable frog costume, humor chips away at that facade. It is a huge weapon to use against wannabe dictators and authoritarians. So even just for that purpose, it's like, okay, everyone's focus now is on Portland, fine. Here's what's actually going on in Portland. And you can pretend, I think at some point I saw this week, some MAGA person claimed that it was like Marxists and Hamas in the frog costumes. It's like, you guys are really like, climbing the wall out of desperation, really. But that's important because what it shows is weakness on the other side. It makes them look as overblown and as performance driven as they actually are.
So I have to say with the frog, what I thought of, and I agree, by the way, but what I thought of is, do you remember when we were doing the Now and Then podcast, somebody mispronounced something off the cameras, and we started calling the founders of the United States the founding frogs.
Oh yeah.
And just and it became kind of a joke in our notes, the founder folk, we either call them the founder folk or the founder frogs. And when that frog was out there, I'm like, look, it's a founder frog.
Oh, once again, I missed a humor moment. I should have thought of that as being a founder frog. Yes,
we should write to the guys and say, look, we anticipated the founder frogs.
we were ahead of our time. Yeah.
All right. Well, we should go face the day, right?
We should. I went looking and couldn't find it, but someone very early on, right when we were starting, said, "How was your run this morning?" And I wanted to respond to that by saying,
"Oh, actually, there is something else to mention that that we talk a lot about what we can do in this moment, and of course, no kings on October 18th, but." Do remember there are 52,000 elections next month around the country for school boards, state legislators, state judges, any number of things. If you are looking for some place to put your anxiety, many, if not most of those elections will be determined by turnout. So that is a great place to put your effort right now to start this change from the bottom, which is 1,000% where it starts from after after the Kansas-Nebraska Act. The 1855 elections, not the 56 elections, the 55 elections changed the entire landscape of the American government. And I should write about that now that I think about it. So turn out.
It's true. And it's very easy. I understand and know how easy it is to think, well, I'm one person, and so, okay, I'll vote. That's fine. And I'll march. But as I said before, a lot of people respond to me by saying, like, what does that do? But the fact of the matter is, historically speaking, that's how change happens. It's bottom up. It's not top down. And every little individual act that we do along those lines, it adds up. How do you build a movement? You build a movement with lots of people taking action, and in some cases, very visible action, to show people that whatever they're feeling, they're not alone. That many people share those feelings. And that's part of what a day like October 18th does, right? And when you take part in a march, part of what you're getting is the simple realization that there are millions of people who agree with you, and you're not alone and isolated with your angst and concern. Lots of people agree with you, and we are the majority. No matter how loud the other side is, we are the majority.
Yeah, by far. On that cheery note, I'm gonna go, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go make an apple pie.
Oh, how nice. I'm going to do what I always do. I go to the farmer's market.
And buy
I,
an apple pie.
I no, probably actually. I love my local farmer's market. I do. And like I got to go say hey to Gary, the apple guy. Like I gotta have my farmer's market morning. But anyway, I'm so glad that we got together to do this, and let's try to do it again next week.
So, September, it's the 18th.
It
Maybe we
is
can do it in the morning.
maybe we could just have a brief sort of woo moment.
Yeah. All right. Let's stay on after this and we'll plan it.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Joanne. Love you.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye.